In the early 80s, with only 4 movies under his belt, the soon-to-be horror legend, that is Wes Craven, tried his hand at a comic book movie. And who was the character that he chose to bring to the big screen from the ranks of the DC universe, you ask? Batman?
No.
Oh, okay. Superman?
God, no!
Oh, of course not. It was Wonder Woman.
What? No. No, not even close.
Who else? Oh, it would have been the Flash.
You're kidding, right?
No? Okay. Well, who was it then? This superhero/horror film was written and directed by Wes Craven and came in at 91 minutes for US audiences and 93 minutes for international audiences when it debuted in cinemas on the 19th of February 1982. It was first released on DVD by MGM on the 1st of August 2000, which MGM had inadvertently used the 93-minute international cut of the film, which contained some nudity, and later recalled the disc and reissued it in August of 2005 with the US theatrical cut as originally intended. It was later released in a DVD Blu-ray combo by Shout Factory on the 6th of August 2013, and on the 8th of August 2023, MVD Entertainment Group released the 4K HD edition.
Oh, that looks good.
This story follows Dr. Alec Holland, a brilliant scientist working on a super secret plant growth formula in the Louisiana swamps, when the sinister forces led by the unscrupulous Dr. Anton Arcane attack him, resulting in a fight that sets off a chemical explosion and transforms Holland into the Swamp Thing, a humanoid plant creature with superhuman strength and a deep connection to the swamp. As Swamp Thing, he navigates his new existence. He becomes the guardian of the swamp, defending it against both the evil Arcane and government agents who seek to exploit its secret. As far as the script goes, I really like how Wes Craven really captures the essence of the Swamp Thing's DC Comics roots while embracing his own quirky identity in the film. And it serves up a nice blend of horror, science fiction, and superhero elements, wrapped in this eerie mysteriousness of the Louisiana swamps. The movie, it's kind of split into 2 parts, with the start of the movie wasting no time, thrusting us into the heart of a scientific experimentation gone awry, with the government and evil outside entities wanting to exploit it. But then it kind of takes a turn and becomes a real classic monster movie, kind of like a mix of, say, The Creature of the Black Lagoon and Bride of Frankenstein. The script has a tight plot combining the sinister plans of the villainous Dr. Anton Arcane with the blossoming romance between a Swamp Thing and the government agent Alice Cable, and adds layers to the storyline in a unique mix of horror, romance, and environmental themes. As the script doesn't shy away from exploring themes beyond the typical superhero fare, it really delves into the consequences of unchecked scientific ambition and resonates with underlying environmental messages, giving the story a surprisingly relevant sort of undertone. Now, the dialogue, look, it occasionally sort of tiptoes into the realms of campiness, especially with a Dr. Arcane, who leans heavy into that mustache-twirling villain, but it can be forgiven in the context of the film's B-grade movie charm, shall we say? Now, the script is by no means perfect, but it does have a great mix of earnestness and a certain campy charm and some real pulp influence to it to contribute to the sort of overall feel of the movie, which embraces both that eerie and the endearing, which was reflective of the style of the comics at the time. For me, this is sort of somewhere in the middle. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. So for that, I'm definitely going to give it an 18 out of 30.
Being difficult.
quitter. Not you.
This movie was not a straight up adaptation of any comic book storyline that I could find, but Wes Craven, even though he may not have adhered to every nuance of the source material, he did a great job to capture the spirit of the character and the themes that have made Swamp Thing a real compelling figure in the DC universe. Now, look, it's time to talk about the costume of Swamp Thing. And when it comes to this movie, it's usually the biggest talking point. But before you make your judgment, you have to really look at it. One, the time the movie was made. It was 1982, so it was limited by its technology of the time. And two, the movie only had a budget of $2.5 million. Now, sure, it could have got you a bit more back then in the 80s, but still, it wasn't like a big budget movie back then either. And yes, today's standards, it would look like a wetsuit with some sticks glued on.
A ridiculous costume.
It was the best they could do, and they did capture the essence of the character's sort of iconic moss-covered humanoid plant appearance.
There's some insane foliage.
Now, as far as the cast goes, if you're a horror fan, there are a couple of names here you may recognise, but for me, I'm not a horror fan. So the only person I did know was Ray Wise from, back when he was in Twin Peaks in the 90s. All the casts, well, they did a pretty commendable job, really, with what they were given, as the characters themselves aren't incredibly deep at times.
My character seemed to lack depth.
Now, Adrian Barbeau delivered a solid performance as one of the film's central characters, and Louis Jourdain, he played this. It's very almost like a James Bond villain, which is kind of a funny coincidence, as his very next movie role was, you guessed it, a villain in a James Bond movie, Octopussy, back in 1983. But most of all, we cannot forget Dick Durock as the Swamp Thing, as despite the challenges of all that heavy makeup and a rubber costume, Durock manages to convey a sense of humanity and emotion through all of it. Well, look, he did a good enough job that they brought him back for the sequel and then the TV series, so it wasn't that bad. Does it hold up now? Yeah, not so much. Look, it was pretty standard for the early 80s movies. So for me, oh God, I'm going to give it a 12 out of 20.
Regrets are trifles when one considers the grand design.
Okay, I have the Australian version, obviously, which has the international cut, because unless you're in the US, apparently you don't like boobs. But I'll get to that later. Yeah, so this one, it's pretty basic, honestly. There is the Blu-ray and 4K release with this beautiful painted cover. I'll just put it up here in a second. And I would prefer that one. That one looks really good. This is just, it's pretty basic and doesn't really convey too much for me. As far as the side goes, I like it with the Swamp Thing on it, but you don't necessarily need the pictures down there. That would pop on its own. And then if we look at the back, very basic for those times as well. Like I said, early DVD productions, not a great deal on there. Didn't really go too hard on there by that. Very basic indeed. As we look at the disc, it is just the Swamp Thing logo, but I do like the fact that they did the inside cover. I know they used to do that a lot in the early days, but they kind of stepped away from it a lot. Just, I don't know if it cost that bit extra to do that extra printing, but yeah, I noticed it with a lot of early ones they have all this stuff on the inside. But yeah, overall, look, it's about as basic as you're going to get. If you want something special, definitely get the 4K edition. That thing is phenomenal. Yeah, so overall, look, I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10.
The gator was only following his natural way. Can't blame a guy for that.
As far as special features go, there are none on this DVD, at least on this version I have. But yeah, look, if you are looking for those special features, I would definitely recommend to go out and get the Blu-ray, or even better, get the 4K HD version, as those things are, especially the 4K, packed with special features like commentaries, featurettes, interviews, etc. So look, if you're after all that extra sort of stuff, which I don't mind, definitely get yourself the 4K HD. But look, as I'm reviewing the DVD and it has nothing on it, well, it just goes without saying that I can only give it a 0 out of 10.
Maybe we should
Get the hell out of here.
As I bring up the Rotten Tomatoes scorecard, as you can see, the critics came in at 60%, while the audience score came in at 41%. Look, I've got to say, I'm very surprised with this, that the critics actually rate it higher than the audience. But the audience score, I suppose it goes without saying, when you look at most of the criticisms about the special effects of this film, as look, it was the 80s, and I guess a lot of the ones that are reviewing it now are comparing it to what they see nowadays. And let's face it, I don't think that's fair at all, because they're complete opposites. Anyway, it is what it is, unfortunately. So look, if we round up the score, we are going to get a total of 5 out of 10.
Is there a gun here? What kind of place you think this is? Of course there is.
So this was the third episode of our subscribers selection reviews, and this one was a close one at one stage with the voting, but Swamp Thing ended up trouncing it home in the end, which is great, as I was actually keen to see this one, as I've never really had the chance to watch it. So what did I think? Well, for me, it was like a big trip down nostalgia lane, as like the look and the feel of the movie was very much like, say, when I watched the first Rambo movie, or even an old episode of like the A-Team, as Arcane's men running around chasing the Swamp Thing and shooting up the place was very much like an A-Team episode from the 80s, and the production values and the film quality were very much on par, which kind of gave it that same feel. And look, overall, I actually didn't mind watching this movie. I did enjoy it, but I probably do have two small gripes with this movie.
Really, what's wrong with it?
Now, as I've mentioned before, here in Australia, we got the international release, and as anyone who knows the difference, is that this version has boobs, boobs, boobs. Now look, I'm not against
Big boobs, small boobs, medium boobs
in a movie by any means, but it just kind of felt like it wasn't really necessary or really added anything to the story. If anything, and I'll run this scene here in particular, it made Swamp Thing out to be a bloody pervert. Watching Alice have a bath hiding in the bushes, it kind of looks like he was there tugging on his trunk, if you know what I mean, while he was watching her. It was a very weird scene. And the other was the final fight between Swamp Thing and Arcane, when he became the monster. And he grabs this longsword, which kind of makes no sense, as he's this rabid, mindless monster. But then he has the presence of mind to duck on and grab a sword, and then, you know, tries to use it on Swamp Thing. It really didn't work, because it should have been those pair duking it out in an old school type monster sort of fisticuffs, you know, like the old classic movies.
I love monster movies.
It just didn't make any sense, you know, because Arcane's running around swinging this sword. It just looked terrible as well, and it just kind of felt out of place. Look, other than those couple of little small things, it's not that bad for an early 80s creature feature film. And look, with that, yeah, I'm going to be generous, and I'm going to give it a 16 out of 20.
What is it?
It's over.
Okay, first off is collectability, and I've got this out of 3, as look, it's one of those classic superhero ones, because there wasn't a lot around at the 80s. So look, if you're doing a collection like this, I think it's definitely one you should have. But is it necessary? No, I wouldn't say it's necessary, but look, it depends how, I suppose it depends where you sit on the collectability side. And as far as availability goes, well, look, since they've released the Blu-ray and the new 4K out there, actually there was still a fair few DVDs out there as well when I last checked. So availability is probably sitting around the 2. It's not like super common, but it's still not hard at all to pick up a copy anywhere on the net. As far as your average price goes, you are looking at somewhere between the $14 to $31 mark for a DVD. But if you're looking for a Blu-ray, you're probably looking at somewhere between around the $20 to $42 mark. And of course, for the brand new 4K release, it is very much up there in around the $50 to $88 range. So make sure you got your pennies with you if you want that version. Now for the final score. We get a grand total of 54 out of 100. Well, I actually thought this might be a little higher than that, but look, it's a pretty good score for a low budget 80s cult classic. So look, is this for everyone's collection? Well, for superhero fans, yes, but for anyone else who's a bit of a casual fan, not so much. But look, if you love yourself some early Wes Craven and a bit of a creature feature, then this one's probably for you.
Monsters belong in B movies.
Attacks him, revolting in a so I'll try that again. Now, Adrian Barbeau, as I bring up the critics, God, I'm having a shocker.